And we start with Judith Sandalow.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Judith Sandalow. As you know, I'm Executive Director of the Children's Law Center and a proud resident of the district and of Ward 1. Many other people have said it, but I want to start with what is the perhaps only really good news here, which is that the rapid housing and grandparent caregiver budget has been protected, and we appreciate that. I won't go into passionate explanation of the impact of the cuts outside of CFSA on CFSA, except to suggest, Mr. Graham, that perhaps you can talk with Dr. Gerald when he testifies about how many more children will be in foster care because of the cuts to TANF and homeless services, and where in the budget there is a reflection of what we all anticipate will be a steep increase at that point. I want to focus on a few things, one of which is the mental health cuts, another is on the possibility of some revenue or other cuts so that those mental health cuts can be restored. As you know, there's been a $2.5 million cut in mental health services, money that has been traditionally given to the Department of Mental Health by way of MOU. We've been told by CFSA that they will be looking inside their budget to find money to give to DMH. We're concerned about that happening without the public having an opportunity to understand what those cuts are, nor this council, in order to provide you with a realistic picture of what those cuts will mean. And I hope that when you question Dr. Gerald, you will ask him where he is planning to find that money. You asked an earlier witness about what the impact will be of those cuts. It is in a couple of very specific areas. The money was spent to fund the Choice Provider Network, which has been explained to be a way of providing training so that we can have the evidence-based services that our kids need. One of those is family functional therapy. The reality is the district does such a poor job of paying its providers that we lose them quickly. So just as we've trained a crop of good FFT providers, they leave. And so there's a need to continue the training of that group so that our children will have the specialty providers that they need to overcome the very specific traumas that they faced by being abused and neglected. So that's one key area. There are also a couple of other very specific specialty providers which DMH and CFSA have identified that will help address the problems our children have. We do not have those providers in the city. That money was going to be spent to train that group of people. It also is used to fund the assessment center, which provides, and this information I get from the Department of Mental Health, about $300,000 of that money is spent to provide evaluations for judges so that they can make appropriate custody determinations and placement decisions in abuse and neglect cases. And I can provide more specifics to your staff on that. We have spoken with the court monitor, who I know cannot be here during this budget hearing, but I know she is concerned, as we are, that these cuts are going to jeopardize progress toward exiting LaShawn. My testimony also talks about a proposed almost $900,000 cut from CFSA's Office of Clinical Practice. When CFSA held their budget briefing, they could not tell us what that cut entailed. I have since learned from their financial officer that that's a mistake and those cuts come from other parts of the budget, but he was unable to provide me with information at the time about where that now $900,000 will come from. Another area, unfortunately, that I think you're going to have to ask Dr. Gerald when he testifies. I think you are hearing from witnesses that they don't know what the impact of these cuts are going to be. And sadly, that's because I actually don't believe CFSA understands the impact. When we go to budget briefings at agencies, we submit a very detailed list of questions, and with most agencies, we get a detailed answer. We did not get that from CFSA. They don't provide us with the answers to where the budget cuts are coming from, so I'm hoping, Mr. Graham, that you'll be able to get the answers that we were not able to get. With my remaining time, let me simply direct you to the part of my testimony starting on page 6, which talks about federal revenue. We have repeatedly asked for CFSA to report in their budget the revenue that they will get from specific 4E dollars. They've declined to do that, saying that they can't get it certified because the state plan amendment has not yet been approved. We wanted to point out, Mr. Graham, that in fact they do account for Medicaid dollars for a state plan amendment that is not approved, and we would urge you to direct the agency to submit that information so that the CFO can certify it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sandalow, and thank you for all of your fine work on behalf of children and families.
It was very hard not to speak passionately, but I heard you say you wanted the details, so I tried not to.
Well, do you want a further opportunity for passion? I'm a great fan of passion. I have it less and less as I... But we all have memories. Well, where am I now here? Oh, yes. We were talking about 4E. We do have some numbers on 4E revenue that we will be, and what is being projected here is that the 4E revenue was $32,800,000 in FY08. It went to $47 million in FY09, $53 million in FY10. We have an FY11 budget of $56 million. And an FY12 budget of $58 million, and we'd be glad to provide this for you, but we are going to be questioning Dr. Gerald about these specifics. And
the ones, and it's on page 6 of my testimony, the one that we're particularly concerned about is recouping the dollars in federal revenue for the cost of 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, and we understand that that money is not reflected in the budget. And it's our belief that if that money
there is money in for FY12, I'm advised, but not for 11.
We were told by CFSA that that money was not reflected in the budget.
For which year?
For FY12.
No, we have it approximately 1.5 to 3 million for FY12.
We're delighted to learn that. We'd love to see your documents then afterwards. Thank you. If you're offering to show us the information.
Well, I believe in complete transparency. You know that. So whatever I have, you have. Now wait. Let's see. And, you know, the point that you make about we don't seem to be able to get specific explanations for impact, you know, is something that's got to be of great concern. Because, like, we know, for example, if there is $1 million less in the grandparent subsidy, we know we're going to be providing $1 million less of services to grandparents and their grandchildren who are in the waiting list to be qualified. That everyone can understand. But when we go to this MOU and we can also understand the cuts in the collaborative, you know, of some $700,000, although we're anxious to have the details, and I hope we'll be getting the details from some of the testimony we're having today. But when we get to the MOU on mental health services, you know, I think it's very important for us to understand very specifically what's going to happen here. And the points that you make in this regard regarding CFSA's its own ability to explain what's going on is very, very significant. But it's useful to keep in mind that if the experience that I've had with other agencies is also the experience here, we can't even be certain that CFSA was consulted on these cuts.
I understand.
You know, because these are being made at sometimes very hurriedly. Sometimes very rapid decisions are being made. Sometimes the agency is fully consulted, and sometimes it isn't. And so they may be at a loss as to explain some of this. Would you agree?
I agree. I would not. It's an unenviable position to have to defend a budget that you don't agree with. I would say I think that it is clear that there are a large number of children who will not be receiving the very specific specialty mental health services which they need, and that the impact of that will be an increased amount of juvenile crime, an increased number of children going to residential treatment, and those wonderful foster parents you heard from are going to be struggling to figure out how to keep a child in their home who, I know as a foster parent myself, from personal example, might be causing danger to other children in the home or to themselves or to their foster parents. And so I'm sure that we will see some valiant efforts to keep children in their homes, but what instead we will see is them bouncing from foster home to foster home.
Yes, if we understand what the cuts are about. But for example, the $895,000 from CFSA's Office of Clinical Practice, you know, if no one can explain what the impact of this is, then it leaves one to wonder, what did we have it in the first place for? Right?
I agree, although I think it's important not to confuse the inability to say what they're spending it on with the fact that it actually isn't in the future going to be cut from direct services to children. So I guess my concern is the inability to figure out today where they're going to make their cuts doesn't mean those cuts won't have to come from direct services to children moving forward. I think what you're saying is that the agency was given a set of cuts, they now have to figure out what to do with them.
Well, no, I mean, I think we have, excuse me, Ms. Sandalow, but I think in the case we've just mentioned, there is a very specific cut. I'm just simply repeatedly asking, what does it mean? Because, you know, I'm trying to fill all manner of gaps in this human services budget in, you know, 6 different agencies. And my attention with the little that I have has got to go to the areas that I best understand.